Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
I'm Matthew Woods, host of Leading Out of the Woods, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you are listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome, EduMagicians, and welcome back to another episode of the EduMagic podcast. My name is Dr. Sam Fessich, and today I'm here with Mandy from the Sustainable Teacher Show. And hopefully you guys subscribe to it after this episode, this great interview with Mandy. We're going to talk all about flipped learning. So get that notebook out, get ready to take some notes. You might want to pause a couple times during the episode so you can jot down some great gems that I know she's going to share with us today. Mandy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to newer teachers. Oftentimes I'm talking to like 5 to 10 to 20-year teachers. And so this is exciting.
Awesome. I'm glad to have you on the show. It's going to be great.
Yeah,
it's also a lot of fun. Yeah, it's also a lot of fun to chat with another higher ed person. So yay!
Yeah, that's part of it too. Yeah, absolutely.
So Mandy, let's start off with sharing your teaching story. What brought you into education and what keeps you coming back into the classroom each day?
Absolutely. So I taught for 10 years just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm certified 7 to 12 integrated social studies. So I taught things like AP psychology and intro to psychology, sociology, American history, all kinds of different versions of all of those.
All the histories.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of like my teacher, here's what I did in the classroom kind of thing. That's a good question. Why did I want to become a teacher? I was always really good at school. And I feel like a lot of teachers, you can go either way, right? Like my husband, he was not good at school and yet became an educator and is now a principal and just earned his doctoral degree. So yeah. So we have like those polar opposite stories. I knew that I could have impact with kids, and I think that always kind of resonated with me. And there was a few things. Another kind of sidebar why was the connection and what life skills that I could teach to girls. And that might sound a little off.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's kind of it's one that I never really got to fulfill all the way. Just never quite was able to do that. But I always had in the back of my mind, I want to impact and let girls know that your value and worth and what defines you is not what anyone else says or determines, right? And so I thought, man, that would be really cool, even if I'm just an example. To my high school students who are girls. And I hope that that's what I did, but I never got to do that explicitly, let's say. But yeah, I actually haven't thought about that one in a while. But yeah, that was one early on, and it's kind of shifted, right? It's absolutely shifted. And now I actually own my own business. I left the classroom a couple years ago and built a business, Teach on a Mission, to support teachers, help them build sustainable classrooms so they can stay there longer. We do that with an online course called Flipped Classroom Formula, which I'm sure we'll talk about here. Oh, yeah. And then we have sustainable teacher memberships. So they are content coaching memberships for psych teachers, AP bio teachers, and high school ELA. Those are the three first memberships that we're doing just because, bite size, we're not taking on more than we can chew. And so, yeah, that's kind of an exciting thing that we're doing. And as of this week, I stepped back into the classroom at the University of Cincinnati teaching 3 classes of Intro to Educational Tech. So pretty exciting.
That is really cool. So I have a feeling we'll probably be geeking out during this episode because we are both teachers of ed tech for future teachers, and we both teach a lot of freshmen. So I'm pretty excited for this interview.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you had shared earlier that you have a course. Let's talk about your passion for flipped learning. Where did it come from? What is flipped learning, and why do we have to know about it?
Yes, absolutely. So I was a really first and second year teacher, but at the end of my second year teaching, decided, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to flip my classroom. I had attended a conference actually in New York City, never been there before, and it was so amazing. And this one teacher had a session, and it was all about his flipped classroom, and I was all in. And that was the extent of my professional development around it as well. It was very much like a DIY and figure it out, girl, if you're going to make this happen. And so what the driving force for me and why I wanted to do it, I wasn't looking for the flipped classroom. I was looking for something to increase student accountability and ownership. I was looking for something that gave me more time to do things other than just lecture in a very content-heavy, rigorous course, such as an advanced placement course, right? Like AP Psychology. But I also wasn't comfortable as a second-year teacher, right? I wasn't comfortable yet, and this is just my personal preference, going on the completely exploratory, discovery-based techniques like PBL or anything like that. I thought, oh no, they've got an AP exam at the end. Kudos to teachers who are comfortable and geniuses at doing that, but I'm just not quite there yet. So flipping really was the happy balance for me. So the idea of a flipped classroom, take a traditional classroom. So let's just say math, for instance. You're in the class, the teacher is up at the board or with small groups, but delivering content, right? Showing the formulas, how to work the problems, doing practice problems. It was a very much I do, we do, you do, which is a fantastic model. But then most of the time, the you do piece was at home, right? That's the homework. So you've got problems 1 through 20 tonight, have those ready to go for class tomorrow. Student goes home and is doing that practice problem, the stuff that's higher up, Bloom's taxonomy, and is the harder parts of learning, and they're done in isolation. In the flipped classroom, you flip those. So the harder parts of learning are now back in the classroom, in the presence of the teacher. So the teacher can actually see when mistakes are being made, where problems are arising or struggles are happening, rather than the student having to explain, well, here's what I was doing in homework, although, that's a key skill as well. But it just makes for a much safer environment for students to make mistakes in the messy process that is the learning process, right? Messy but beautiful. And so that whole classroom culture is really what I was going for, and the flipped classroom is what allowed me to do that. So fast forward, right? This is like a long story here. Fast forward about 8 years, and I had millions of views on my flipped videos on YouTube. I did not foresee that happening, nor is that really a perk that I tell flipped classroom teachers. Like that's not what you're going for, but it's something that in my journey told me, oh, wow, like we're onto something here. I didn't, define or discover flipped learning, but I could absolutely help other teachers do it, make that happen for them. And so, and I had kind of been doing that. I'd presented at the state level about flipping and, all kinds of district level professional development, but then the wheels started turning in my brain, and started this business and created the course Flipped Classroom Formula, and I've now helped over 500 teachers flip their classrooms. So it's been an exciting ride, especially during and after, well, I guess we're not really after the pandemic yet, but because of distance learning and all things, stuff that I don't really have to describe here. And it's just allowed teachers to make themselves and their classrooms more accessible, but in sustainable ways for them. We were just talking, you said, don't check your email or your messages after 7 p.m., right? Well, that makes you inaccessible, which is healthy boundaries for you. So how can you have accessibility to the content still? And the flipped classroom is really what has allowed me and a lot of other teachers to do that. So
It's kind of like duplicating yourself, right?
Yes, yes, in a
Yes.
funny, kind of cheesy way. Like it
Yeah.
sounds cheesy that you can duplicate yourself.
Yeah.
But I mean, think of a student who, while you're lecturing or delivering notes in class, and if their personality allows them to, they raise their hand with all of their
Hmm.
questions, which they
Right.
absolutely should if they have questions, right? But oftentimes there's hopefully what is subtle, but sometimes not so subtle annoyance from other students, like, oh, they're raising their hand
Yeah.
again, right?
Or even
Well,
nonverbal cues. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. But and I don't know what's worse, but like, let's say their personality or their introversion doesn't allow them to raise their hand. They
Hmm.
just don't. And they just get totally left behind as far as like
Right.
their understanding and processing. But now with the flipped video, they get to pause their teacher, they get to rewind their teacher, and no one
Hmm.
has to know.
Right.
No one has to
Right.
know how long it takes them to do notes or that
Hmm.
they had to watch it a few times.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of been a cool part of it too, that other teachers have come to me saying, you wouldn't believe this like cool moment that I had with my students when so I'll tell you this really quick story. Carrie Tafiro took my course and she actually was on the podcast recently. And she said, I was talking to a student of mine and said, hey, I feel like you should go back and watch this video again. And she said another student within earshot heard this and later came up to me and said, Mrs. Shafiro, I have to watch videos rewatch them a lot. This is a student who is on an IEP, has some accommodations and such. And she said, and you just said that to a normal kid, and that makes me feel so normal.
Wow.
That other
That's
kids
powerful.
who are quote normal, in the words of this
Hmm.
child, they have to do some of the things that I need to do in order to learn
Sure.
well. And I about fell out my chair. I like had to dab my eyes a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like what an awesome moment. So there's so many things. I could talk for hours about the flipped classroom, but those are just a few things. Yeah.
So for this podcast, we're talking to beginning and future teachers. So we know
Mhm.
about the what, we know about the why, how it can help our students. What are some best practices if this is a method we want to try out, maybe in a student teaching, with the blessing of our co-op, or maybe in a
Mhm.
field experience, again, blessing with our co-op, or for a
Mhm.
beginning teacher, where do we even get started? What are some best practices whenever we're thinking about implementing a flipped learning model? And follow up kind of related question. Do we have to flip all the time or can we flip a one and done
Oh,
type
okay. Here
thing?
we go. So, for beginning teachers and really teachers who are going to be student teaching, and if you want to give flipping a try, I think that is such an awesome way to kind of dip your toes in the water, right? Is try with one unit. I don't know if I would recommend even just trying with one lesson,
Yeah,
because in
yeah.
that first lesson, you're going to get kickback from kids because it's something different. And it's not something different like, ooh, let's try this new tool. No, it's totally flipping everything. Like the word
Mhm.
really it flips it upside down. But so are your results, right? Your results are then in kind as well. So I would recommend, if you're going to dip your toes in it, try it for one unit. And I think student teaching and really even your first year is a good place to start because, there's really not a sense of normalcy anyway. So in all of the crazy, right? But once you get into kind of your groove, maybe second or third year of teaching, and if flipping is exactly what you want to do, I recommend taking a summer or some longer length of time to say, all right, I'm going to make this happen, because it's not I think, this is just my 2 cents, that you're going to have the best
Mhm.
results from your students as well as the biggest classroom cultural change if
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
full on. But with that being said, no two flipped classrooms can, should, or have to look the
Right.
same. So you want to make it work for your unique students, their
Sure. Yeah.
unique access to Wi-Fi and devices, their unique homework completion, right? Rates. I'm not going to do a traditional flip
Mhm.
where I assign the
Mhm.
videos at home for homework to my on-level 10th grade American history course when 75% of them never do homework.
Mhm.
right? Could I fight tooth and nail and maybe get, 50% of them to do it? Sure. But is that worth it? I don't think so. So do an in-class flip. So there's ways to kind of make it work for you and to meet the specific individual needs of your students. And so I want to recommend some tools, though, something that absolutely. So I love Camtasia, but Camtasia is not free. So I don't want to recommend that to brand new teachers who are like, barely can afford their pumpkin spice latte. But let me recommend Screencastify or a similar tool like Loom. And here's what I want to recommend. So even if you're only using the free version of Screencastify, which is all I use, you're not going to be able to make a ton of content delivery videos with that if you're only limited to 5 minutes. But here's a way that if you want to just dip your toes in flipping, that you could use it. When you get a parent email or even a student email, you've got it on your screen, or maybe they're asking about something that you have what they're asking about on your screen. You open up Screencastify and you respond with a video instead of a typed out email. I do this in my business. I will do this with my husband sometimes. No, let me make a video, right? Like think of talking, texting, right? Like a Voxer or, something like that. It's just quicker and easier and allows for a bit more connection too. And so I think what teachers will see is the benefit in doing that really quickly and then think, wow, what if my content was that accessible and students could connect to it that easily? So that's my first recommendation. I have lots of others, but I don't know that we have time for that.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And think about just that connection that you have with the student or the parent. If you do a video message back to them instead of typing it out, you can now have this part. They can see the intonation. They can see your facial expressions and everything. Oh, that's awesome. Can we possibly go through 3 more tech tools that you suggest for people getting started with flipped learning?
Yes, absolutely. So the one that's huge, but I didn't get to use it in my classroom because it wasn't there yet. What I used was Play Pause It, which is still a great tool. Play Pause It is still a great tool, but I think the one that the teachers I work with, they like more is Edpuzzle. And what you can do is take any video and put questions within the video, and you have lots of settings that you can toy with that they can't move on until they answer it correctly, those sorts of things. And in the flipped classroom, students watching the content is even more important because you're kind of giving up some control there. So that's a huge one. The other one I would recommend is Google. Well, what is really Google Forms, right? I was going to say quizzes, which you can use that with your students as well. But I use Google Forms more for my data collection than anything, and spreadsheets and all the conditional formatting and stuff like that.
Ooh, love that conditional formatting.
I know, right? It can totally be a rabbit hole. But if it helps you, right, the purpose is more important than the cool factor.
Yes, right.
So yeah, let me think of another one. Okay, this one is totally basic, but I love it because inside of Flip Classroom Formula, and what I recommend to all teachers who flip is that you make guided notes for your students. And I made this for my 11th and 12th grade advanced placement students. I made them guided notes. They still wrote quite a bit, but those guided notes allowed the students to really listen and absorb more so than frantically write. So the tool I'm going to recommend is either, it's not rocket science, PowerPoint or Google Slides to make your notes, to make your handouts. So oftentimes teachers think of those as a presentation tool, right? The slide deck, and that's it. I actually use PowerPoint and Google Slides to make almost everything inside of my classroom. Handouts and dittos and worksheets and all those sorts of things, right? And then it also allows for student interactivity digitally as well. They can drag and drop and do all kinds of fun things that way too. So that's my other
That's
one.
great. That's great. I love that. Another flip tool that I recommend would be Nearpod. They also do the video with the pausing now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you can also have things set up for student pace mode, so they can go through it. You can collect that data too. So
Yes, that's a
Nearpod's
popular
pretty
one.
awesome.
Yes.
Yes. Mandy, this has been such a fun conversation. I know we're just scratching the surface of flipped learning. So I know my listeners are going to want to first connect with you and learn more about your program. So can you please share where we can get all that lovely information?
Yes, absolutely. So you can come and check me out on my website, Teach on a Mission, but I want to get something in your hands if you're wanting to kind of explore your flipping journey, is what we call it. If you're wanting to kind of get started on your flipped classroom journey, go to teachonamision.com/starter kit. And what I will give to you is exactly that, a flipped classroom starter kit that's just going to help you take a first few important steps in the right direction on your flipping journey. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter as Teach on a Mission. I think on Twitter, I have a 1 in there somewhere. Like the first I in mission is 1, just to keep everybody on their toes. No.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. So, and then I also have my podcast, the Sustainable Teacher Podcast. I hope you can come and check it out. All about, like I said, helping teachers build sustainable classrooms so they can stay there longer.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Mandy.
Yes.
And I'll make sure I put all those links in the show notes, and I'll make sure I get the correct Twitter handle on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you. I really loved our conversation.
There you have it, EduMagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram @sfessage. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.